episode 13, I think.
Is it 13?
Yeah, the unlucky number. But it's not a Friday. It's not a Friday.
It's not an unlucky number if you're a Muslim, though, is it?
Yeah, because that would be bad, isn't it? We don't believe in numerology.
Right. We've got the burgundy jumper in the team as well.
Me and Saif decided to match today, and then Ibrahim decided to not wear his burgundy jumper, which is a bit disappointing because it's so famous. The fact that
I've got two of them.
Yeah, I was just about to say, it's that famous that Ibrahim's decided, you know what, I'm going to get a second one.
The News Roundup, episode 13.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone, and welcome to another week of the News Roundup. Here I am, your host, Khidr Mohammed, and with me today is our co-founder, Ibrahim Khan, and we have another Khan in the house, Saif Khan, who is our engineer, right?
Yep.
So today we've got a very exciting episode for you with very big stories, so let's get straight into it. The first story that I wanted to talk about, and I find this absolutely like crazy, but it's about the rise of Kidfluencers. Yes, I kid you not. So a report went out that basically said the 17-year-old TikTok star Charli D'Amelio, I believe that's how it's pronounced, earned more last year than...
I like how you're distancing yourself from her. I don't know how she's pronounced, but Charli D'Amelio.
I have no idea who she is, legitimately. But she earned more than the CEOs of Exxon, Starbucks, McDonald's, and Delta. And that is crazy. So she got, she converted her 133 million TikTok following into $17.5 million worth of brand deals, product promos, and clothing lines. We have the curious case of Ryan's World, where we have 10-year-old Ryan KG, who has a YouTube channel that is based on children's toys, and he makes about $25 million a year. Similarly, toddler influencers, toddler influencers. We've got 3-year-old twins who have a channel and reportedly make about $300,000 a month. Now, the question is, why weren't my parents putting me out on YouTube when I was a toddler? Probably because it didn't exist, but
I think we've got to we've actually got kids of that age, Kabzi. We should do something here.
I've got 4-year-old twins.
I know we actually have something to play for here. Let's if we failed, we're over the hill at this point. Why don't we get those guys on it?
That's it.
But you always feel that it's saturated, isn't it? Is there a chance for our kids to...
Yeah, but is there a Desi kid? Is there a Desi kid opening, I don't know, those mutke that they give in Pakistan, for example?
Maybe, yeah. There's value add there, I suppose.
You get those chickens, these little chicklets in Pakistan where they color them in different dyes. You get red, green, and blue baby chickens. I'm sure that's not like health and safety, but it happens.
Immoral.
But it happens, and if I saw a kid with a YouTube video doing that,
we probably don't want to get PETA on the case, but we'll
but we'll make sure they do it abroad, not here.
That's it.
Just import these chicks. But it's a curious story, right? Like, there used to be a time when these CEOs would be the millionaires, and now suddenly you've got content creators who are just basically like owning it and raking it in. What are your guys' thoughts?
I mean, what I wanted to ask you guys about is what's really the difference between the kidfluencers who are earning millions and back 20 years ago when you had kid actors like the child actor in Home Alone, which we all know because that's like the famous Christmas movie that we've all watched. What's the difference between the two? The only thing I can see is it's a different medium, but they're still raking in the same amount of money, relatively speaking.
Astaghfirullah, Christmas movies.
Yeah.
What you been watching, Saif?
The whole thing is really fascinating. I think that there's a slight difference because I think there's only one Macaulay Culkin, and there's loads of these guys, and I think the barrier to entry is a lot lower as well.
Yeah.
Macaulay Culkin, you couldn't really rock up and just be like him, but my little son has a shot at this potentially. and I could actually start him off, tonight. Actually, I might start him off, and I think the entry barriers are lower, and I think that actually more generally across the influencer landscape, there's it's just been really commoditized. The things that previously would be the barriers to entry are just really available cheaply.
Yeah.
So I think it's a fascinating old space, and I think the other big trend here is that they're taking a lot more of the margin. So the reason why these guys are rich is because they have a lot of these brand deals and sponsor deals, not YouTube ads. YouTube ads is decent, but it's not the key thing, and that only happens when you've got this kind of leveling of the playing field. I think they're actually the new BBC, and the new Disney or whatever is actually these channels.
Yeah, I mean, what's interesting is the barrier to entry, right, to any kind of creative activity is so much lower. As you said, you don't need a whole studio, a whole setup, or something like that we have right here. It's literally in the palm of your hands, and I think that can be extended to, not just kind of kidfluencers, but also outside of that realm as well. I mean, a good example is, a person who does photography. You can take a photography course on Udemy for £10, get a decent £100 camera, and just start taking pictures. And then sooner or later, people will start asking you to take pictures for free. But then slowly, you'll start asking for commissions. And that's not just photography. It goes on to any other art form, and even going into the engineering. I mean, how I learned about my how software engineering, the profession I have right now, is I had taken a few Udemy courses. I probably spent £60 in total, learnt all those courses, and alhamdulillah, I got a job here. But
is that what you did?
Literally, that's what I did.
Can't believe it.
Ibrahim's like fooled. He's like fooled.
His CV said he took a Harvard course.
But funny enough, the degree I had taken, which costed £27,000, right? I didn't learn that much, contrast to the 60 quid I spent on Udemy and learnt at home. So I was in the comfort of my own home. I had my own hours of learning, and it was way cheaper.
Another content creator platform, right?
Udemy, yeah.
And I feel like this is, so there's two things that I find interesting here, is that one, I feel like it's that big aspect of Web3, right? Where all the platforms are going back to the creators, and the people are now owning this. Whereas before it was like, for example, the same with NFTs, where art was prized and held by, professionals in the art industry. But now it's pretty much up for grabs for anyone to become a big, high-flying artist. And the second thing I find interesting on this is, well, I shouldn't say interesting, but more concerning, I would say, is that the whole aspect when it comes to kidfluencers and privacy and protection. Because as we know with child actors, there's huge psychological harm that many of these child actors go through, to the point that when they're growing up, they almost certainly get involved in certain types of drugs and misuse of situations. But then you also have cases where they're not given the right protection, and that can lead to lots of situations that are not very positive. So I think there should be more protection around this.
Yeah, I mean, going particularly to the actual kidfluencer point, right? These kids who are now famous, there are quite a few problems with it. The element of privacy is a big one. That now, since from a very young age, everything's out there in the open, right? And that's a scary thought, because when they start turning into adults, growing up, that concept will still be in their mind. And likewise, it's because they're kids, other kids who use that platform, such as TikTok, will start, learning from them. And then there's always that fear, especially if you're a parent, that, you don't want your children kind of picking up bad habits. And so that's another point. So we have the privacy, and then we have not just these creators, but the viewers of these creators, because they see, oh, he's a kid or she's a kid, I want to be like that. And sometimes what they do is probably not, something the parent would like their children to, do. So I think those are the 2 points that I find that are, something to be wary of.
The other thing is it will get creepy at a certain point, won't it?
Yeah.
When, Ryan grows up and he's now a 20-year-old man unwrapping presents, children's, toys and stuff. that's quite creepy.
There's got to be a
Yeah.
cutoff point there somewhere.
I think somewhere, yeah, they do just need to cut it off and be like, okay, let's get like, you know, I don't know, Ryan's kids to now take
just
over the
take
channel
over.
or something.
I mean, saying that though, there are these unboxers, right? Like there's Unbox Therapy, which is a huge YouTube channel where the main thing that guy does is he gets tech products, unboxes them, and gives his first impressions. So maybe Ryan does have a future on
His toys
these
just
platforms.
change.
Yeah, his toys need to
change.
change. Yeah, like he needs to grow up with his audience.
Exactly.
But if he's still stuck, you know, opening toys at.
But
I
to
don't
be
know.
fair, if he's made like 300k a year, 300k a month over, you know, whatever year, how many years, and just saved and invested that,
Yeah,
then
true.
by like he'll just retire at like 20.
Also, do you think it's legitimate for me to take my child's earnings?
Uh,
I think it's legitimate for you to put him on camera to begin with.
Do you not?
He's under the age of consent. Sorry, that was
No. I mean, okay, so this is a great point by our assistant director, Majida Begum. So she just mentioned, if you didn't hear that it's not allowed for you to, or she goes, it's not right for you to take a video or photo of your children without consent. Don't know.
No.
Okay, I gotta correct that one.
Like, of course, you take pictures of your children as you should. You want to document them growing up.
I'm not sure if I agree with that. So just for those of you that weren't able to hear that, Majida made a point that she doesn't think it's right for you to post pictures of your children publicly where there's like, you know, 100,000 people being able to view their pictures because there's no consent there. But my idea.
Oh, by the way, guys, you might be wondering why have they got Majida off camera? We're working on trying to get her to come on as well. So if you would like to at some point see Majida and other members of the team, please comment below.
We also need a fourth chair as well.
Yeah.
We can arrange that. But yeah, I'm not sure I quite agree with that because I very much believe that, look, although it's your right to do, although like, you know, there are your kids and you should be wise about the decisions you make, but ultimately, you should be thinking about how things will affect them in the future. But if we start this whole conversation on is there consent for this or is there consent for that, then you can't really do anything. Like I remember there's this really big mummy TikToker or YouTuber or something, and my wife told me that she was very big on you getting consent from the baby to change its nappy. And I found that, like, I know like society is degrading at like an astonishing rate, but I just find this like liberalization just completely stupid.
That's
because
silly.
it's a baby. Like my children come up to me and ask me like, Dad, take pictures of us, and they like seeing like whatever pictures. I'm not saying that they know what Instagram is or what stuff is, but I do think that there is like, you know, you should be wise, but ultimately like the concept of consent is still like not quite there yet. Moving on to our next big topic, Saif, what have you got us?
So yesterday, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, everything was popping off on my socials about how Microsoft have got a deal to buy Activision at $69 billion, which makes it one of the largest acquisitions in video game history. In fact, it may be the largest. So if guys who don't know, Microsoft have a gaming division called Xbox, which, you know, the Xbox console and then the platform, and then Activision is a publisher which has many studios, and it also owns the trademarks for Call of Duty, World of Warcraft, these huge games. So Activision have been making, you know, billions and billions of dollars in revenue every year. But what's really interesting is the actual amount that Microsoft have bought this company, because Activision Blizzard over this last year has been getting into a lot of trouble. There's been discussions and revelations of toxic workplace culture. You have sexual discrimination. You have diversity problems, and more just keeps coming out. And it's interesting on two fronts. One, you know, Microsoft have now bought out this massive publisher with all these different gaming companies, and now they're owning more and more of the kind of video game marketplace. I mean, before they had a $7 billion with another publisher called Bethesda, and, you know, they have their own, you know, dozens of studios which makes their own games as well on top of all of this, right? So that's the first part. It's interesting how they're trying to get this kind of monopoly, you could say, and get that advantage over Sony, their main competitor in the gaming front. But the second interesting part is it's bloody ridiculous. They got bamboozled on that price. $70 billion for a company that their games are going down. It's been getting bad reports of, the workplace culture, etc. I think they got bamboozled, but
What's the revenues? What's the annual revenues?
So the annual revenue of 2021 was $7.5 billion, and in 2020, I believe, is around $7 billion.
That's all right then, isn't it?
It's all right, but
it's a 9x multiple on that.
Yeah, but as of the last year, the ratings have dropped for a lot of their games. It's been decreasing, and the whole 2021 was rife with the troubles in their company. Papers, articles after articles of how bad it's gotten.
Sure, but I think that's already in the price. So like,
sure.
Normally you'd see a buyout of maybe like, somewhere between 10 and 20x.
Sure.
Whereas here it's 9x. So,
yeah. I definitely agree that, it's probably less, and it's probably what's happening over the last year has probably pushed them to kind of make that sell to Microsoft. I mean, speaking of this, like I said, my whole social media was just popping off with this, but the deal is not closed yet. I mean, they're still in discussions.
2023, right?
2023 is going to close. But yeah, let's see what happens. But Sony took a big hit on the stock market, and Activision took a nice little jump of 30%. So, investors in Activision, they're pretty happy.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, right? Because I saw on my on my stocks trading app, like all the stocks for gaming companies have just shot up, which was very interesting. And then the other thing that I was going to say is that Xbox knows it's like losing ground to Sony so bad because of the popularity of the PS5, and the PS5 has just been like, even compared to like previous consoles, like I think the PS4 was superior to Xbox, whatever they had one. Like no one played the Xbox One compared to the PS4. And then now that they have their Xbox X series or whatever, PS5 has like demolished that. So I think
I will add to that though. I'll let you finish, but I will add to that.
All right. But I feel like Microsoft, out of its desperation to kind of like take a lion's share in the gaming market, although they already have like the PCs and all of that kind of stuff, but out of their desperation to take out the competitor Sony, they've decided that the best way to do that is just to acquire all these various gaming companies.
Yeah, and the reason why they're acquiring it is what Xbox have is something basically akin to Netflix, which is called Xbox Game Pass. And the idea is that all these studios that they have, all the games that they'll produce will be exclusive to this Xbox Game Pass, which is this subscription service where you can play their games via the cloud on the console for free as long as you have that subscription. And that's the advantage that Microsoft Xbox have over Sony. And so when you start to acquire more and more and more of these studios who pump more and more games out, people are going to go, well, the more value option is this Xbox Game Pass, which is this subscription series.
I still don't think you can beat PlayStation's exclusive.
You've
from
got
a quality
such standpoint, I probably agree, but I think this is where the long-term play comes into mind.
True.
Like what Microsoft is doing is this long-term battle with Sony. The other thing is quite interesting is, as you said, all these game stocks shot up. I think a good reason for that is now that we see Microsoft are just buying out studios, there's this interest from investors saying, hold on, maybe I should buy more gaming stocks because Microsoft will buy out this company and this company. So they're trying to kind of chip in early, right?
True.
So they can cash out big.
True. Any thoughts, Ibrahim?
I don't play games.
Ibrahim's thinking, these children and their games.
No.
I'm trying to build a unicorn here, and they're talking about video games.
No, I think it's fascinating. I think the other interesting trend here is this whole metaverse play. Because I think that, where does Unreal Engine sit into all of this as well? Is that like a separate company?
So Unreal Engine is a separate company, and what they provide the tools for developers to make games.
To build games, okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
It's a platform, yeah. But what I find is strange is what happened to Google Stadia?
Oh yeah, we don't talk about that.
Google tried to break into the gaming market by creating this whole cloud cloud gaming service, similar to like I think Xbox Game Pass.
Yeah,
just
but it's
flopped.
very different because their business model was very bad. You would pay for the subscription, which essentially allows you to have a console in the cloud, but you have to pay full price for every game. Well, what Game Pass is literally Netflix, where you just pay the subscription, you have access to these free games, most of which you can play on the cloud for free, providing you have the subscription, or you have the games for free if you have a PC, any Xbox One or an Xbox Series console. Saying that in mind, a lot of people are laughing at Xbox and saying, oh, PS5 is better. But over the last year, because of how good this Game Pass thing has gotten, more and more of my friends, my family have been saying, you know what, we need to get an Xbox. So I can see Xbox and Microsoft's long-term plan really working out. So yeah, it's interesting.
Talking of games, we've got a very fun game coming out in an event called InvestQuest.
Yes.
See what I did there? We'll put a link below. It's basically there's a very rich man who has died. Oh no, he's not died yet. He's going to die very shortly, and he wants to give away all of his fortune. And he set up this game that requires him to work out who is the best team in the country in order to manage his huge amount of wealth. So yeah, check out the link below and turn up. He's got IFG involved to help him find who it is. And there's actually going to be a prize as well. Not billions, but there'll be a prize.
So you heard it here first, folks. Make sure you keep an eye out for InvestQuest, and you will be having a lot of fun with that event. Now, moving on swiftly to our next story. Ibrahim, hit us with what you've got.
Yeah, so I want to talk about shared ownership and that as a model for buying a house. Over the last, I'd say, 5 to 10 years, we've seen an uptick in activity in this sector in both the UK and the USA. And in the USA, it's been a bit more prominent. Blackstone bought out a company called Home Partners. And the idea behind this company is that they allow you to rent your house. You put down a deposit of sorts, and then you have this option after 5 years of buying the house. If you don't take up that option, then they will actually let you continue renting in the house, and that deposit doesn't get lost. And then there's others who are just literally giving you access to buy a house, and they're slowly allowing you to buy into the property rather than have this option business. And in the UK, you find that a lot more prominent. There's not this, there's no option aspect. It's literally just you buy and staircase up your ownership in a property. And there's companies like Wayhome, Primary Finance, there's Crowd to Live, which is doing a slightly different thing but in the same space, and a few others as well, and a few other large shared ownership schemes that are more focused around their buildings. So it's usually building, housing manufacturers who do that. I find it's a fascinating trend because I think it's tapping into this new demand for people to own a house and call it their own thing and not live this kind of precarious life where you're moving from rent to rent and from tenancy to tenancy. And at the same time, it comes at a time when house prices have gone through the roof as well, which makes it a lot more difficult to actually get yourself onto the housing ladder. So I think it's a fascinating trend. I think it's only marginally better overall than renting from a cost perspective, from just purely a cost perspective. But I think if you take in all the other things into consideration, it's probably a good shout. Yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts.
I think the idea of shared ownership is really good because I find, like, I'm someone who's looking to buy a house soon, but the property ladder is so hard to get on. But what I often hear, and this is not something that I personally believe, but this is a contention that many others have, is that what is really being done here with this business model is essentially that you're kind of being ripped off because you're not only paying a mortgage, you're also paying rent. Whereas in a conventional mortgage, you'd just be paying like whatever interest on top. So some people are like, this is worse than interest. And they often like try to use this argument. What would you say to that, Ibrahim?
It depends on the models. I mean, some of them I think admittedly are exactly that, where they will make you pay nearly market rate rent, and then you have to buy into the equity of the house. Others, they're a bit more, they game the system a little bit, so they charge you below market rate rent, so that you have enough money to actually then pay into the house. And then because they own equity in the house, they control a huge amount of leverage when, over the next 20, 30 years, that's where the money is actually going to be coming from. So they can play with that. They can adjust it depending on competition, right? And who else is there and what people demand. But if absolutely necessary, they could bring all of their capital gain down to the bare minimum and just give that all to you, and roughly create the same model as a mortgage, your typical mortgage.
True.
Interesting. So what I would like to ask you, Ibrahim, because this is something that I'm interested in as well, like purchasing a house, as perhaps many of our audience are, is out of the key options that we have, obviously with the interest of many other big companies trying to get into the shared ownership scheme, the shared ownership, like compared to Sharia compliance mortgages, shared ownership, which would be like the one that is perhaps more preferable for the average person, I would say? Or you can't
you mean from an Islamic perspective, or
from an Islamic perspective first and foremost? Yeah.
So from an Islamic perspective, there really isn't much debate around shared ownership. Like, it's obviously perfectly fine.
Sure.
An Islamic mortgage, in my view, is also perfectly fine. I think there are some naysayers around that, and I think that's if it all boils down to it, I think it's, in my humble view, that they probably don't understand fully the complexity of the circumstances out of which arose the product that is Islamic mortgages, and so I think from an Islamic perspective, my personal view, if you take that into account, is basically they're kind of similar. If you want to be very, very, very safe, then go for a shared ownership scheme. From a commercial perspective, the Islamic mortgage is almost always better because they're just cheaper. And so that's kind of the situation. So Majid is asking about people who say that because of the current context where it's very difficult to get onto the housing ladder, and it's a house is a very, very important part of your assets, getting a conventional mortgage should be okay, and there are arguments made along those lines by people across the UK, and I think it's a view, it's a legitimately held view by even some scholars. My personal view is that a conventional mortgage is an interest-based loan, and there are now, as we've just discussed, equivalents, Islamic mortgages and shared ownership schemes. So I'm not sure that I personally take the view that it's ever justified to go for a conventional mortgage. Where there were no options like that, let's say 20, 30 years ago, then I think it would have been fine. I think it would make sense, but not right now.
Fair.
Makes
All right,
sense.
moving on to our final topic for the day. What have you got for us, Saif?
Yeah, so we were talking about the rising prices in the house market, but unfortunately, we had some quite bad news over the last couple of months now, is the rising prices in house bills, specifically electricity and gas bills. So what's happened essentially is that the wholesale prices of electricity and gas have been increasing to phenomenal rates, and then those costs are then passed on to your energy supplier, and then obviously the supplier needs to make money, needs to make profit, it needs to support their business and the people that work under them. So those costs are then passed on to the customer, and it's expected that in April costs will rise by 40%. So if you're paying £1,000 for your electricity and gas bill a year, then that will increase to 1,400. And there's another gross expectation that by the end of the year, it may increase to, I believe, 70 or 80%. So, you'll be paying £800 more. If you originally paid £1,000, you'd be 1,800. With that in mind, I think it's probably good to kind of hand it off to you guys and ask, what can people do to kind of alleviate the situation? I mean, there's a couple of things you could do with your gas and electricity company by being on a fixed tariff that will kind of protect you from these rises. But beyond that, like, what else could people do?
It's a tough one. I know there's an energy company that said hug your pets and wear socks, and they're getting slated for it. But that's because they're an energy company saying that. If I say it's fine, I think you should hug your pet and you should wear socks and you just hustle, right, a little bit. If £800 is going to be a difficult addition to your bill, and for most people it would be, then that means looking at cheap ways. Just Google it, cheap ways of insulating your house. Getting a few layers on, thinking about the windows open and the windows shut that you have in the house, things like that make a big difference. And obviously I hope that the government sorts out this new policy. They're thinking about where they're going to try and reduce and subsidize energy bills for everyone, which would be great. But if not, it's a tough one, really.
Yeah, but I definitely agree with. The hug your pet and put some socks on, like, if you need, I think this is one of the things I've learned in the Desi household, right? Like, you put a jacket on, right, when it's cold. Like, you don't need to always put on the heater, always put on, the electrics. So maybe that's a tip for everyone, just to kind of,
Fair. And I think on that very positive note, we're going to call it a wrap for today. Thank you so much to my wonderful co-hosts, to Majida, to our cameraman Kabzi, and inshallah catch us in another fortnight. Take care. Assalamu alaikum.